All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. If you do have any legal, financial, or tax planning questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. My name is Chris Berry and with Castle Wealth Group, certified financial planner, certified law attorney, and we do these workshops or webinars about once a week, every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, where I just log in and if there's any questions submitted, I go ahead and answer those questions. So this week, we didn't have any questions submitted ahead of time. So if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A and we'll go ahead and address it. But I have a couple things to cover just that's kind of come across my desk, kind of like news and things I'm looking at. All right, if I have a new, here's a question. Okay, all right, we'll get to that question. And let me open up something else here so I can capture these. But yeah, so if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A and I'll go ahead and answer it. And we always start with positive focus, just something positive that's happened over the last week or so. And this last week, my daughter Madison, who's right there, and this is an old picture of her. She's now 11. Need to update my pictures. She just competed at states for Odyssey of the Mind. Odyssey of the Mind, it's like a kind of a STEM problem solving, creative endeavor. I remember it as a kid, and they won regionals, or came in second for regionals. So they advanced to states, and they came in fourth, unfortunately, at states. So they're not going to the Worlds, which, to be honest, it's in Iowa during the week. So I was kind of like, yeah. And she would have to miss one of her band concerts, so she wasn't too broken up about it, but just pretty cool. All right, so see a couple questions coming in, so that's good. But before I get to those questions, I'm going to share my screen here. This is something that I've used with clients, especially when we're concerned about long-term care costs. And this is what I call a hybrid or asset-based long-term care option. And not too often do I get into talking about specific tools because our approach is always like, what are your goals? What are the best strategies? And then tools. And we're not trying to sell people on tools, but it is something that we've used pretty regularly recently. So this is something where if you're concerned about long-term care, like long-term care costs, one of the things we can always do is set up an asset protection trust, and that protects against like nursing home and Medicaid cost. And these days, a nursing home runs about $10,000 to $15,000 a month. So that's the big, expensive, devastating cost. And that's where we can set up an asset protection trust, move the assets into the trust. We call it a castle trust. And once we make it 5 years, everything inside of the trust is protected. Meaning now we can have Medicaid pay that base level of care, and then we have a pot of resources to improve our quality of life. Or if we're married, to ensure that the healthy spouse isn't completely impoverished having to pay for the care. So we set up a lot of, we call it a castle trust, which it's a great tool. Even my parents, even myself, we've set up castle trust for them. So like that's a great tool, and that's a legal structure, but that's not the only way that we can address long-term care costs. And what we see is that there's this elder care journey of needing home care, assisted living, nursing home care, and home care might run you $2,000 to $5,000 a month. Assisted living might run $5,000 to $8,000 a month, and then nursing home runs $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And so we set up a lot of castle trusts or asset protection trusts to protect against that nursing home care. So now Medicaid can pay that cost of care. But the question is, what about like home care and assisted living? And that's where I'm not a big fan of traditional long-term care insurance. In fact, someone just writes in, I've heard long-term care costs going up like double, triple premiums or more. Any truth to this? The answer is yes. And that's one of the big reasons why I don't like pure traditional long-term care policies, for two reasons. One, you can pay on it your whole life, and then if you don't use it, you lose it. All that money is wasted, right? And then the second one, and this is a big one that we've seen, and to answer the person's question, is yeah, I've seen the premiums increase all the time. Like too often, I've seen a client who was sold a long-term care insurance policy like 15 years ago by someone else. They come in and they've been paying $4,000 a year their whole life, and then all of a sudden the premiums increase to 10,000 a year, and they're stuck in a position of, do they take a reduction in benefits? Do they let the policy lapse? Or do they pay the higher premium, which could be difficult when you're in retirement? So I'm not a big fan of traditional long-term care insurance policies. I'm not saying if you have one to immediately drop it. I'm just saying that it wouldn't be something that we're looking at as a tool where, if your goal is to protect against long-term care costs. So instead of that, that's where we look to things like the asset protection trust as a tool to protect against nursing home care. The key with that is we have to make it 5 years before we need nursing home care, because Medicaid has a 5-year look back period. But again, that asset protection trust where we can now bring in Medicaid, that's only going to pay for nursing home care. It's not going to pay for assisted living or home care. And so over probably the last 10 years, we've seen a lot more of what we call hybrid policies or asset-based long-term care strategies. And what I want to show is one that we can set up where there's a cash value associated with it, so that if you don't need long-term care and like you pass away, then there's a benefit that goes to your spouse or your loved one. So the money isn't wasted. So it's still there. It's still yours, but it's just leveraging assets to help pay for long-term care costs. And there's different ways to do it. And I'm not saying like everyone should do this specific tool from this specific company. But one of the things that makes this product or tool relatively unique is that there's no underwriting. So even if you have dementia or Alzheimer's, this is something that could potentially help if we were to need long-term care costs, or if we're concerned about long-term care costs. Because a lot of times people don't even think about long-term care until they get some type of diagnosis or something like that. And just today, this came across, share my screen. And this is something that we support, is the Alzheimer's Association. So every year we do the Walk to End Alzheimer's. So this was an email from the Michigan chapter. There's 7 million people that are living with Alzheimer's. And that's something that's Alzheimer's dementia. It's something that's affected my family and affected a lot of my clients. And a lot of my clients' big concerns revolve around long-term care. So I'm always looking for ways to help that. And what I wanted to share is a tool that we've used in some client situations recently through a company, Equitrust. Again, the tool doesn't so much matter, it's the concept. And if you're interested in this, I can send you some information on it. But really what we're doing here, so if you look at some of the like long-term care costs, nursing home, and this is across the nation, it's about $9,000. Right now in Michigan, you're looking at about $10,000 to $15,000 a month for nursing home care. So what this is an investment tool that you put in. Again, it's asset-based long-term care. So I'm not saying you should put all your money into this, but it's a way that you can put some chip off a portion of your investments. And now, based on whether you do want to go through underwriting or don't want to go through underwriting, we can leverage those assets. So now we can get a bigger bump in terms of long-term care costs. So in this situation, we put in $250,000, and right off the bat, even if we already have a diagnosis of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or whatever it may be, we're going to leverage those assets. So you're going to have a bigger base of long-term care benefits. So like in this situation, someone's 71, retired, they have kids, he wants to basically leverage some of his assets for long-term care so his kids aren't covering the cost. And in this situation, he goes 10 years right off the bat, though, before we get to the 10-year part. And this is where we've used this when someone already has a diagnosis. It's automatically leveraged where this $250,000 turns into an initial long-term care benefit base of $375. And then if you pass away, understand that there's going to be a portion of this, a big portion, that's going to be available to the kids. But assuming that we go 10 years without needing this, now that 250 has turned into $450,000 worth of long-term care benefits, paying out roughly $8,000 a month. And again, the cool thing with this is that the money isn't lost that you put into this. So there will be a benefit to if the money isn't used for long-term care. And then B, the nice thing is there's no underwriting with it. So obviously this benefit base is going to be greater if you were to go through underwriting and qualify, but it's something that's available even if you don't want to go through underwriting, like you already have some type of diagnosis. And this is just an example of one of the tools for asset-based long-term care, or these hybrid policies. And really what they're doing is they're linking like an investment and adding on a long-term care benefit to that investment. And it can be done through life insurance, for example, or other insurance products like fixed index annuities. And again, like you shouldn't drop all of your money into this. But if let's say you have $1 million, you could put 200,000, which if you don't use it, it's going to continue to grow. But now we're leveraging some of that money for long-term care. And it's great because it can be used for home care, assisted living, or nursing home care. The problem when we get to nursing home care is typically the costs are so much, we wouldn't want to insure the cost of long-term care. So that's why a lot of times what we're doing is we're doing this, the asset-based long-term care, to cover the home care and assisted living. And then we set up the asset protection trust to cover the nursing home care. In fact, that's what we did with even my parents, is we set up a asset protection trust because I don't want one of my parents to be completely impoverished if the other one needs nursing home care. But I don't want my parents to go to a nursing home. So we have this asset-based long-term care strategy to try to keep them at home as long as possible. So just something that we've been doing, and we had a situation where we did it with some clients recently. So thought it'd be helpful to share that. And then something else that came out, or something that came across kind of my radar this week from some other attorneys I was talking to. Let me share that screen 1 second. This was actually sent over from an attorney over in Traverse City. So as elder law attorneys, like we kind of talk and kind of share what's going on. But this was in Traverse City, the Record Eagle, Traverse City newspaper. And it was entitled Death Then Debt. And if you want a copy of this, I can email it. Just email me and request a copy. But basically it's talking about estate recovery, which we've had in Michigan since 2014, if I remember correctly. And this is a common situation. So basically what happened is individual went into a nursing home and had a house that was just in their name. The house ended up going into probate court, which that's a mistake in the first place. Like, even if we're not talking about like estate recovery and Medicaid, there's no reason that real estate or anything should end up in probate. That's where we set up trusts, we retitle assets, we do things like ladybird deeds. But they didn't do it in this situation. So the home ended up going into probate. The individual went into nursing home, and Medicaid, because the home is an exempt asset while you're alive, Medicaid actually, they're able to qualify for Medicaid. So they didn't have a lot of other assets. But while they're in the nursing home, looks like they're probably only in there for a couple months or a month or two. Medicaid paid out about $12,000 or $11,000. And because the home ended up in probate, Michigan has what's called a state recovery, where now the state of Michigan, Department of Health and Human Services, they can actually place a lien on your home to recover whatever Medicaid paid out in benefits. And so, again, that's why we set up a lot of asset protection trusts to protect the home, not only to protect the assets in the home while you're alive, but also to protect against the state recovery upon your passing. But Michigan has a state recovery where if the home ends up, or any assets end up in probate court, and again, that's important to avoid just on its own because it's costly, it's time consuming, and the judge is involved. But if an asset does end up in probate court, Michigan can actually place a lien on any assets to recover whatever Medicaid paid out. And so this family, there's really no other assets. The only asset was a home, and it was $250,000. But now Medicaid placed a lien on it. And basically, when the individual passed away, they had the probate court force the family to sell the home instead of it going to the kids or something like that, to sell the home to pay for that nursing home care. And the sad thing is, this didn't have to happen. In this situation, assuming they don't have any other assets, it's super easy to avoid this situation. All we have to do is what's called a ladybird deed. It's named after Lady Bird Johnson, and it's not like Lyndon Johnson did this, but there was a law professor that wrote a bunch of, or wrote a legal book, a treatise on different types of deeds, and named them after certain celebrities. And so he named this one after Lady Bird Johnson. Technically, what it's called is an enhanced life estate deed that says the home is in your name while you're alive, and then upon death, it avoids probate, which means in Michigan, it also avoids estate recovery. So this is where, again, a family kind of was put in a bad position because either they got bad advice or they didn't talk to, say, a certified elder law attorney. And again, the way that we avoid this estate recovery in Michigan is that we either set up an asset protection trust and we make it 5 years without needing nursing home care, or we can do what's called a ladybird deed, which is a type of deed that says a home is in your name while you're alive, and then upon death, it avoids probate and avoids estate recovery. Now, Michigan has what's called estate recovery. Some states have what we call enhanced estate recovery. So as long as the asset doesn't end up in probate, it avoids estate recovery, which is what Michigan has. Other states might have enhanced estate recovery, which means they don't place a lien on assets that end up in probate. They place a lien on any assets when you go into a nursing home. And actually, there's some rumblings that I think there's a bill that's been introduced federally to get rid of enhanced estate recovery and potentially estate recovery. So it might be something that ends up going away, but as of right now, Michigan does have that estate recovery, and there's certain steps that you should be doing to make sure that a lot of times we see it for the home to make sure everything avoids probate, which is always important. And then also, especially if we're concerned about nursing home care and Medicaid, avoids the estate recovery on the back end. So again, it's kind of I read the article and it's kind of a sad story because it all could have been avoided by a simple ladybird, which is not that expensive to set up and pretty straightforward and easy. So yeah. All right, now let's get into the questions. So I just wanted to cover those two things, both referring to kind of long-term care. All right. So as I get into questions, if you do have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. And the first question, let me put it here so we can all see it. Let me make it bigger. All right, so the first question here. Share my screen so everyone can see it. All right, so the first question. If I have an annuity which pays an RMD, can it be converted to Roth? Okay, so we need to make a distinction here. So most likely this annuity is inside of an IRA. So inside of an IRA, you can have money in the market, like at Fidelity or Schwab. You can have like fixed index annuities inside of an IRA. So think of an IRA as a wrapper where you can have different types of investments inside of the wrapper. You can have like cash, you can have like T-bills, you can have CDs, like you can have bond, like you can have a ton of different things inside of an IRA. So it's a wrapper. And the key to one of the most important things with the IRA to understand is that once you turn 73 or 75, it used to be 70 and a half, you have to take money out of this, whether it's in the market, whether it's in a fixed index annuity, whether you have it in cash, whether it's T-bills, CDs, bonds, whatever. You are forced to take money out of the trust and pay the trust, or take money out of the IRA and pay the taxes. And that's called a required minimum distribution. So that's required. Like you have to take that money out. So it doesn't have anything to do whether it's an annuity or not. It more has to do with the fact that it's an IRA. Now, with that, the RMD, that has to go to a taxable account. Okay. So you cannot take a RMD and do a Roth conversion. That goes for all IRAs. So that has to go to the taxable account. In fact, whenever we're doing Roth conversions, like we have to take the RMD first. So that might be $30,000 of income. And then we can do a RMD or a Roth conversion or something after that. Okay. So you can never take an IRA RMD and do a Roth conversion on that. What you can do other than moving it to a taxable account, if you are interested in, if you have charitable interest, you can do what's called a QCD, which is a qualified charitable distribution. So if you donate to church or charities on a regular basis, instead of donating to from like your checking account where this is money that's already taxed, what the QCD, if you're over 70 and a half, allows you to do, meaning you can do these even before you have RMDs, you just have to be 70 and a half. RMDs now are at 73 and 75. But if you're over 70 and a half, you can basically write a check from your IRA and send that directly to your charity. And that's a better way to do it because this money hasn't been taxed. And then once you turn 73 or 75 and you're forced to take money out, well, okay, you have a choice. You can either send it to a taxable account, pay the tax, and now you can invest it or spend it, or you could do a qualified charitable distribution. So if you do have charitable interests, you're donating to church, I'd recommend you do it from an IRA, not a post-tax account. So that's just like IRAs and RMDs generally. And then the other question, or kind of the second piece of this, is that it's an annuity, most likely a fixed index annuity. Some fixed index annuities allow you to do, it's not necessarily internal because it creates a new annuity, but you could do an internal Roth conversion where now that Roth is in a new fixed index annuity. Only a handful of companies allow this. Some of the bigger ones do, but you could do a Roth conversion. Again, it's not RMD money. That has to come out. Like that's not negotiable. The RMD either has to go to a taxable account or you have to do a qualified charitable distribution. But if you are looking at Roth conversion, so ignoring the RMD, but you do want to take more money out of that pre-tax account, if it's an annuity, some annuities allow you to do an internal Roth conversion. But worst case, what you could always do is open up a Roth IRA at, like, we use Schwab or Fidelity or Altruist. Those are our custodians. So we could open up, well, actually, let me take one step back. Well, we would open up the Roth, but first, if we don't already have an account, we'd open up an IRA at one of these accounts, and we would take the money that we want to take out of the annuity, move it from the annuity to one of our custodians, still an IRA, so still no taxes paid. But then once it's there, then we could do the Roth conversion into basically whatever we want. Okay. So the two options, if you want to do a Roth conversion from an annuity, not RMDs, but on top of the RMDs, is we could do an internal Roth conversion where we keep it as a fixed index annuity. Some companies allow that to do that. Worst case, we roll that money over to an IRA, no taxes that are paid. Then we do the Roth conversion and we get it into the Roth IRA. So simple question, but complicated answer. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, let me see this next question. All right, so let me copy this and we'll put this in here. All right. Do you have thoughts on taxation on recent National Association of Realtors potential class action suit refunds for recent sellers that we've seen in the news? Are the commission refunds from the class action suit taxable if the sale of an inherited home owned by a living trust? So this first part, or this last part, whether it's owned by the trust or not, that's not going to be relevant at all. So that doesn't matter. So my answer to this would be no. And again, I'm just kind of reacting to it. So if you get, well, I have to look into it a little bit, but my understanding or my remembrance of this, and I learned it at one point, but I kind of forgot it at this point. When you receive a settlement from, say, a lawsuit, my understanding is, as a general rule, that's not going to be taxable income to you. Yeah, so that's not going to be taxable income. I think that there's some portion of the settlement that could be, if it was, I don't know. To be honest, I can't remember. But my general feeling off the top of my head, and again, this question just came in, is that typically when you receive a settlement, that's not income. It's not income. So it comes to you like a gift or anything. Like gifts are not income to you. Which like we've been doing a lot of our in-person workshops and we're talking about gift taxes, and like I would say half the time when we're talking about gift taxes, the only person ever paying the tax potentially is the person making the gift. Whenever you receive a gift, you don't actually pay any tax. And so similarly with settlements, like as a general rule, it's not taxable income. So my feeling would be that wouldn't be taxable income to you, because typically a settlement, like it's not like you earned it. I'm just trying to think of a situation where I would think it could be taxable, but no, I would say, again, don't quote me 100%, but my feeling would be that would not be taxable income. That's something I can look in if it's something that pops up. All right. Here's a question. Oh yeah, okay. All right, here's another question. And this is the last one I have. So if you do have any more questions or thoughts or something's unclear that I talked about, feel free to put it in the Q&A. All right, let me share my screen. All right. So there's a new book called The Great Taking. I haven't read it yet. Have you? Sounds like laws were changed and now I don't own my shares, but some other entity has claim on these, huh? Maybe a question after I read about it. Yeah. So this actually just came up this week when I was talking to a client. I haven't read the book. I kind of got they kind of gave me the cliff notes on it. So the book, it's called The Great Taking. And the idea is that like, we don't actually own all the stuff that we have these days. Like your shares of stock back in the past, you would have like a physical, like, here's my stock certificate that says I own it. And so with kind of the way finances and technology have went, like we don't have physical stocks, like even bonds. A lot of times, like you have the like electronic versions of them. And so The Great Taking, and again, I haven't read it and I haven't even like really looked into it. I was just talking to a client about it and they kind of gave me the summary notes. But the idea is that we don't own this stuff anymore, that they actually leverage our assets uh, to do other things like banks and financial institutions. And the concern is that because we don't actually own it, like especially if things go like really bad, they can take our stuff. So that was kind of my understanding from just talking to a client about it. Is that something that's keeping me up at night? Not really, because like we're all in this together. um, I look at that as something that's way above our control, because like, what are you going to do? Are you going to just keep your money in cash or gold, or or whatnot. So that's not really something that's keeping me up at night, because there's so little there. And this question has come up in different ways of like, all right, like in the past, like the dollar was linked to gold, and then was it in the 70s that it got delinked, and now it's like we just agree that this is the value of the dollar. So even like cash, like there's no inherent actual value. We've just all agreed as society to say that this is the value. So if things really go bad, like it doesn't matter whether you have cash or gold, it's all about like guns, ammo, and food. Like, um, so yeah, like it's not my biggest concern. I'm more concerned about things like taxes, like where taxes are going. But I've heard of this book a couple times, so I probably should end up reading it just because it's creating a lot of conversation. Okay, thanks. Do you know if it is legal to own or keep gold? Uh, no. So here's a question. Let me put it here. All right, so here's another question. And let me share my screen again. Let me make it bigger so I can actually see it. All right, now let me share my screen. All right, so the question is, do you know if it's legal to own or keep gold? It's not illegal. A lot of my clients have gold and precious metals and toys and stuff like that. So no, it's not illegal. Question sometimes people ask me is like, hey, should I like be putting all my money into gold or um, like physical commodities like gold and silver, gold coins and stuff like that? Um, and this is just my feeling, take it for whatever it's worth. But like I was talking about, like the only reason we uh, give value to the US dollar or any currency is we just all agree that it's worth X amount of dollars. So if things really go bad and like kind of zombie apocalypse bad, then yeah, we've assigned a certain value to gold, but it has no intrinsic value. And so that's where if you're really concerned about kind of the world ending type stuff or zombie apocalypse, then instead of gold, I'd be looking at like guns and ammo and food. Um, because again, like I don't know, and maybe it's because I watched Walking Dead, but you didn't see a lot of people exchanging like gold bars for things. Now that said, like people do assess value or give gold a certain value. So if you want to kind of hedge against that, then having some of it in portfolio, like gold ETFs or something, I think makes sense. But also keep in mind, like especially right now, if you go to if you buy say $10,000 worth of gold bars, and then the next day you want to sell it, you're not going to get $10,000 because there's a transaction cost. I had a client a couple of years ago. He was in the trades and he did some work for some a very wealthy person in Birmingham, and in their basement they had all these like gold bars, and like the wealthy individual wanted to sell them to the person at like half the value, just because he couldn't unload them. So there's a transaction cost for it. Um, so I'm not against it, and I think like having 0 to 10% of your net worth and things like that is like a hedge or alternative may make sense, but I wouldn't necessarily um, have all my money sitting in gold. All right, here's another question. Assuming no, assuming no zombie apocalypse, yes, can buy physical gold in a self-directed Roth IRA, hedge against deviation of dollar. Yeah, you can. Um, you can use a self-directed IRA to buy like real estate, businesses, physical gold if you want to. If you don't want physical gold, you can actually there's like gold ETFs where if you do want some gold exposure, um, like we use gold ETFs in portfolios. But and again, it's just my personal feeling, but having a ton of physical gold sitting there, um, it's not something I'm doing. Let me put it that way. So, uh, okay. Let me see. No other questions. All right. With that, thank you, everyone. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email them over and I'll address them on the next call. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye. Make it a great week. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.